Good afternoon. It's Wednesday, the 26th of October, 2016, just after 1 o'clock. Welcome to UK Column News. I'm your host, Brian Gerrish. With me in the studio, Mike Robinson. We will be joined by live video Skype link by David Ellis from Strategic Defence Initiatives. Before we move on to the news, we'll just say that the key weather report from across UK today is that it's a tad chilly in Glasgow. And a bit grey and cold here as well. We'll move on from the weather.
Yes. Okay. So the jungle, of course, is being taken down, and we're hearing that fires burning there at the moment. But this article from The Independent, unaccompanied children again, they're saying 1 in 4 councils have not accepted refugee children from the Calais jungle. This is Councillor David Simmons, the local government association, saying those arriving from the Calais camp will require care and support packages directly from councils and their partners. But unfortunately, a number of councils are not taking up this role. Leicestershire County Council, they give as an example, undertook a report earlier the month and found that as many as 76 of the 152 councils are not taking part in the National Transfer Scheme. Well, perhaps those councils are less certain of their ability to look after these children, Brian.
Interesting question, Mike. More children coming into the country. Some of them are saying we don't want any of these children, but we ask what's happened to the 360 plus missing Syrian children. These are children who clearly don't feature in the UK's child protection programme, presumably because they're Syrian, they're refugees, they're not really worth very much. So when they disappear, our police force, our Home Office, Home Secretary, excuse me, doesn't want to do anything at all.
Indeed.
Something very sinister, I think, going on here with children in UK at the moment.
Okay, Theresa May then. This is The Guardian calling this an exclusive. What Theresa May really thinks about Brexit, shown in leaked recording. I'm not going to play the recording, but go to the Guardian website and listen to that. But here's what Theresa had to say. She said, I think that she was speaking, of course, to a bank. It goes without saying. This was Goldman Sachs she was speaking to in May. And she had this to say, I think the economic arguments are clear. I think being part of a 500 million trading bloc is significant for us. I think, as I was saying to you a little earlier, that one of the issues that a lot of people will invest here in the UK because it is the UK in Europe. And she went on to say, if we're not in Europe, I think there would be firms and companies who would be looking to say, do they need to develop a mainland Europe presence rather than a UK presence? So I think there are definite benefits for us in economic terms. So although she made no public statement in the run-up to the referendum, it's pretty clear that in private meetings with bankers, she was giving her impression that she was for remaining within the European Union. So does Brexit mean Brexit? We shall wait and see. I think we have an opinion on that. But here is the next bit. There are definitely things that we can do as members of the European Union that I think keep us more safe. David, this is probably the key thing that she was pointing about. What do you think she was hinting at here?
Well, you can see the direction, can't you? We've got that take that being in the EU, she thinks is a good idea. She's saying she thinks it's a good idea, and it keeps us safer. We're now seeing post-Brexit, obviously Fallon going to Germany and announcing enhanced defence union. So, obviously we already know that that's going down the pathway of full EU military union to allow perhaps closed looping on the fact she was talking to bankers there to get their EU treasury. So it seems to be, did she tell those guys what they wanted to hear? So if that's the case, is she being duplicit with them, or is she being duplicit with the public? Well, somebody needs to make some sense.
Yeah, this is a good question, isn't it? I suppose when a politician speaks, you've got to assume that they're lying. So the question is, in which form are they lying the most?
I think she'll be lying to the public.
Yes.
And the other thing I'd just like to ask again is that where did Theresa May actually go when she had a holiday in Switzerland shortly before assuming office or immediately afterwards? She disappeared, and the press reported that Theresa May was on holiday in Switzerland. Well, as you pointed out to me earlier, David, what do you do in Switzerland? Well, a little bit of downhill skiing, or maybe you're enjoying a fortified coffee, or else you're eating a Toblerone. Was she visiting the Bank of International Settlements? This is the key thing, because if we've got a dialogue with Goldman Sachs, I think we can be sure that behind that there's a dialogue with the power machine, which is the Bank of International Settlements, and they would be the key banking organisation pushing for the European Treasury. So it'd be nice if Theresa May would come clean, but I think she's a little bit too dirty for that.
Yes, well, let's continue along those lines. Ex-Prime Minister David Cameron has decided that, according to Newsweek here, that he's going to write a tell-all autobiography addressing Brexit and more. They don't say what the more is. They say that this is going to be a frank expose of Brexit and why he made those decisions. Cameron said it was an immense privilege to lead the Conservative Party for more than a decade and the country for over 6 years as Prime Minister. I'm looking forward to having the opportunity to explain the decisions I took and why I took them. I'll be frank about what worked and what didn't. I'm looking forward to working with the talented team at William Collins, which is who are publishing the book, in the months ahead. Now, of course, the Pig had a comment, well, unfortunately, there was no mention of the Pig in the Newsweek article, so it's unclear as to whether the Pig has had any input into any ghostwriting input, for example, into the book itself.
This is true. What can we say, really? I don't know what to say, Mike. We'll come on to the fact that we're almost lost for words. The quality of the politicians that are running Britain at the moment, very, very dangerous people, some of them purely in a political sense, and some of them because it's easy to see that interests which surround their political position verge on criminality or perhaps even cross the border.
Indeed. Now, we'll be mentioning the Winchester Conference later on, of course, and Tom Crawford will be speaking at that. Now, of course, Tom Crawford suffered at the hands of this organisation, having had his house repossessed by them, UK Asset Resolution. This was part of Bradford and Bigley, so when Bradford and Bigley was wound up, it was split into a good bank and a bad bank, and of course the taxpayer held on to the bad bank. So UK Asset Resolution sale process is now underway, apparently. £15.56 billion from Bradford and Bigley assets. They're going to try to sell off and recover that money for the taxpayer. Well, we'll see. So this was first announced in March at the beginning of this year in the budget. Philip Hammond said, as part of our plan to recover all the cash British taxpayers injected into the banking sector during the financial crisis, we have begun the process of selling our Bradford and Bigley assets. So that's nice, isn't it? Apparently, all the money is going to pay off the national debt. £1.6 trillion is the government's part of that. 15 billion is going to make a huge impact on that, isn't it?
Or not.
Or not.
And of course, we can say that the figures that you've consistently been showing, Mike, are never produced in the national press and media, so that we can see the plight of Britain at the moment in context against somewhere like, for example, Greece, that's been hammered about the state of economics in the country to the extent the European Union takes over. What is the current state in UK? Worse?
Well, it's interesting. There was an interesting statistic published earlier in the week, which said if you take London out of the equation, because of course London's going to be an autonomous city region, if you take London out of the equation, the UK's standard of living would be equivalent to Spain.
Yeah.
So, not much.
Well done, David Cameron.
Yes, indeed. Well, good news. The NATO has had a stamp produced in its honour. This is a Belgian stamp just produced to commemorate the new NATO headquarters in Brussels.
They'll be able to send letters to the digital ballistic nuclear submarine we're creating.
Well, indeed. So, David, that's good news, isn't it? Look.
No, beggars believe, isn't it? I mean, it's just I'm speechless. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, this is a recurring theme, being speechless. But anyway, the Atlantic Council here published an article today saying the NATO-Russia exercise gap then, now, and 2017. Now, Atlantic Council think tank in the field of international affairs, founded in 1961, and it is one of these typical international think tanks, international political business and so-called intellectual leaders, it says. Well, military exercises, they say, are a critical means of testing, refining and demonstrating the readiness for combat operations. And in 2015, we published a chart comparing the magnitudes of military exercises conducted by NATO and Russia. And the contrast was jarring, with Russian exercises dwarfing those of NATO. And they have now updated the chart, which I'm going to show you in a second. Now, in the then section, they say in 2013 and 2014, Russia frequently executed large-scale exercises. These included at least 6 drills involving between 65,000 and 155,000 personnel, 4 of them over 100,000 personnel each. In contrast, the largest exercise conducted by NATO or Allied forces during that time frame brought 16,000 to the field. Russia's military conducted numerous no-notice SNAP exercises, sometimes involving 50,000 personnel. I find that pretty staggering, that 50,000 people are involved in a SNAP exercise. Some SNAP drills, they say, were personally ordered by Vladimir Putin. Of course, they've got to get the dig in. They test the military's ability to mobilize and deploy. And then they go on to the now situation in response to Russia's invasion of Ukraine and other provocations. NATO promulgated its Readiness Action Plan during the Alliance's September 2014 summit in Wales. A key element of that was a more robust exercise regime. So they've updated the chart, and here it is. And the columns in red are the Russian exercises in terms of the number of people put on the field during the exercises. And it's just staggering, the numbers of people, Brian.
So because the text is a little bit small there on screen, the left-hand column, the tall one, that is 160,000 people. And then the tallest one on the right of your screen is 120,000. So these are, if you're up at 160,000, you're getting towards mobilizing a full army. So these are really large numbers of personnel. And of course, nothing beats scale. If you're practicing going to war and you're moving huge numbers of troops and material around, you are doing the job properly. When we've heard David Cameron, for example, talking about the fact that Britain is mobilising 5,000 troops to go into Eastern Europe, this is simply posturing and playing games. So a vast difference.
So, David, on the face of it, this does look pretty spectacular. Now, Peter Hitchens recently was giving somebody a hard time on Twitter for suggesting that Russia was a threat. And Hitchens' argument for that was that Russia only spends a fraction on its defence budget as NATO does. But this seems to counter that position. So perhaps it's the quality of the way that the money is spent rather than the quantity of money that's important here.
Yeah, there's definitely if you've got the savvy and the acumen to decide on what you need to procure and what you need to have in and some kind of well, the one thing we desperately need in this country is a reality check between the political interface and all the rest of it. So whether obviously the capability thing there in Russia is starting to spook a few people. Maybe they've realised that they have got capable forces. But nonetheless, it doesn't change anything from the sphere of NATO being the bus to EU military or defence union. And as we've said many, many times, once the EU or whatever you think is the EU, whether you think it's a bank or a parliament, whatever, that's for the eye of the beholder. It will then have its treasury. Once it's got its treasury, it can issue tax bills. It's a state. It can then. Are we? The questions we need to ask everyone: are we then a state? So, going back to their capability, obviously, if they talk up that the saber rattling and the war talk that Russia's got all this terrible stuff now, of course, it's only just become a military superpower, hasn't it? The defence spending slightly is sort of incidental. but it will suit certain factions to talk that up, because it will allow them to get what they want, and what we've all got to say to ourselves is, what do we want in Britain?
Yeah.
David, I'll just add to that. Of course, if we look at the Russian military capability, they've got a much more refined, simpler procurement system. So their military will be looking at what they want. They're obviously going to be working with manufacturers and the research teams, but all of this is in-house. It's all being done within the Russian framework itself, whereas what we've got now is this gigantic mess of procurement companies. So we in Britain, of course, are manufacturing some stuff, but we don't manufacture a lot of material. We've got to now go begging to the French or the Germans, or work in cooperation with pan-European groups, or it's got to be done in cooperation with the Americans. And if we just take Britain's new aircraft carriers, we can see the shambles unfolding. We've got aircraft carriers that were designed together with the French. That automatically means that you've got compromise after compromise. Then you're going to bring in an American aircraft, which has so far got a disastrous track record. So if we just look at the reality, the Russians may be spending considerably less, but I would suggest that they're getting much better value for their dollar spent on defence. And what's going on in Europe is a complete shambles, which is getting bigger as, of course, the European Union tries to draw more and more nation states into the one supranational state. So you have consistently said we've got to watch where the procurement and the military supply chain goes in Europe. The Russians don't have any of that problem.
Yeah, they're much more streamlined. We've got a massive monster now, because if you look at the quantity of money being spent on the actual infrastructure and the machine at the DE&S and all the other groups that are around it and all the other bodies that are around it, well, the one thing they're not doing is actually making anything. People have sort of said to me that there are around about 35,000 people around in this arena. So that being so, that's actually more than what's in the Navy and the RAF. On that end of the spectrum. But we've got to come back down to brass tacks in terms of the policy and the money, jobs, families, and our internal market and our internal driver with engineering and manufacturing, where people have jobs and stability for their family, and how that money works within the country. Now, we've all got to just go back to one point of irrefutable status. Business is war. So this is a war that's being waged, way ahead of any actual physical confrontation. So all this alignment and cajoling, we used to have in this country useful, productive companies, Hawker Siddeley, Avro, and so on and so forth, that used to manufacture timely goods that worked in a good fashion, and they were sold and exported all over the world. And that derived revenue, it derived jobs, it derived stability, it produced a huge engineering and manufacturing tree within the country. Everything else then fed off, like the car industry or any other industry that was below the tiering of military. Now, because we've cut that off and we've stopped it, and we've gone down this single point EU route with the Sandys paper in '57 to make BAE, we've actually marched towards the European mantra for some 50, 60 years now. And our MPs, whether they know about it or not, that's incidental. The fact is, no one's talking about it. None of them are challenging it, as none of them are challenging the actual sharp end of the military union point. Do you hear any of them speaking about it? Let alone the actual business workings and the money workings of our jobs and our people. They don't discuss it.
Totally agree. A stunning silence. And perhaps Theresa May's now given us the clue, because, of course, the dirty work's all being done behind closed doors in Europe.
Indeed. Okay, well, let's talk about Syria then, because there were a few jibes in that Atlantic Council report. But in the meantime, Willy Wimmer, the former State Secretary of the German Christian Democratic Union, was commenting to Russia Today This is what he had to say. We should never forget that it's the US, Great Britain, France, Saudi Arabia, and Qatar that have created the civil war in Syria. Absolutely correct, and glad to see somebody saying that. And he went on to say that the only power which is actually in accordance with international law in Syria is the Russian Federation. He said, and the interesting thing is that everything that the West is doing in Syria is against international law, and they have no support of the UN Charter. Even what the German militaries are doing there is against the German constitution. He said we have to take this into consideration when it comes to accusations from Human Rights Watch and others. So more and more people seem to be coming out of the woodwork to tell the truth, and people that perhaps would be considered more serious in terms of the mainstream.
I think this is happening, Mike, because despite the block on information from what, the dreaded mainstream media, BBC, of course, leading the propaganda, more and more channels are putting out truth, and people are picking up on this and beginning to think about it. So,
yes,
yeah.
But in the meantime, speaking to France 24, Michael Fallon, our favourite defence secretary, says that he's beginning to despair whether Russia really wants any kind of settlement at all, other than to see 3/4 of Syria destroyed. And yes, you laugh, Brian, and I'm afraid that was my reaction as well, because this guy is just a joke. And of course, Russia has made it absolutely clear that what they want to see is an end to Western-backed terrorism in Syria, and they'll do whatever it takes to make sure that happens.
Yeah.
In the meantime, this article from Foreign Policy magazine, and this what they're saying is that the United Nations General Assembly might vote as early as next week on a resolution sponsored by Austria, Ireland, Mexico, Nigeria, and South Africa, which is calling for the convening of a United Nations conference in 2017 to begin starting negotiations on a treaty banning all nuclear weapons. Well, they say the security climate is not such that is conducive to nuclear disarmament, and they're quoting a senior U.S. official who's saying that until we have a relaxation of tensions, and until you've got a Russia that's willing to engage in further nuclear disarmament, it's going to be difficult to make progress. So, this article really saying that the United States intending to really put the kibosh on any such nuclear arms deal. So then you ask why?
I would suggest,
it's kind of rhetorical in a way. But
I would suggest because they are exceptionally worried now about Russia's military capability. I think there's quite a few video clips on this where you can look at short clips about the modernization of the Russian military, and they're talking about modern weapon systems. But I think that the Russians have really caught the Americans by surprise on the type of military equipment that they've brought forward. And the Americans' reaction to this is to revert to, we've got a bigger sledgehammer. So they want to retain their already significant nuclear superiority in the hope that this is going to provide some form of defense. I think this is desperation and bluster by Obama.
Yes.
Well, let's get on to a positive note against all of the things that we see happening. We're going to say that the British Constitution Group event on November the 19th, we have started to get a really excellent response to this. Many people are saying they've been waiting for something to happen that would enable a focus to be brought about what was happening in Britain. Many people, of course, are now caught up in the lawless state that is the Conservative Britain in 2016. So people coming together in this fantastic venue in Winchester. This is a picture inside the hall. I can't say we're going to have the pink lighting there, but it is an extremely attractive venue. It's got a wonderful feel to it. And as Justin Walker has been saying, there's something very special coming about here as people meet to look at how we reassert the rule of law in UK. So if you haven't got a ticket yet, of course, the discounted tickets are there on the website. Do get a ticket, do bring a friend, but tickets are going quite quickly. It's something you need to be attending if you're as concerned about UK as we are. And then we're also going to say thank you very much to Mike. This letter gave us a laugh and the donation was very nice to receive. This is what he said. Hey, fellas, I thought I might add a brief rant to the enclosed, but I find myself just as speechless as you. God bless you all, Mike. So these are communications that come into us, and I've got to say they do give us a huge boost when we realise that people do watch what we're talking about, they're understanding what we're talking about, and they are as speechless as we are. So thank you very much, Mike, for that letter and the enclosed donation. Now we're going to follow through on what the agenda is for destroying, the mechanism is rather, that is destroying UK. Now some of this we've covered many times before, but we get more information and we're able to put more parts of the jigsaw together. And we had some information in today, we will get to it in just a second, which starts to lock together how the UK is literally being destroyed from the inside. But first of all, let's jump back to 2010 when the HM Treasury started this initiative, Total Place, a whole area approach to public services. And recently, of course, Mike, we've had the global estate coming in, that all of our public sector is to be brought together under one banner. So this was a new direction for local public services and local authorities, a range of freedoms, a new relationship with government. So this is touching on constitutional issues, but it doesn't declare it. It simply, it drifts it in as a way to deliver better value for money. So the citizens at the heart of it all, and it was rolled out in 11 pilots across the country and 34 primary care trusts. They always go for the NHS, 12 fire authorities, 13 police authorities, and a wide range of third sector organisations and service delivery bodies. And of course, David Cameron has moved across into that third sector himself. So this is what we say, this is the government's change agenda, and they're working on the policy that you've got to destroy the old before they can create the new. So let's bring in the sort of thing that gives us evidence for this. Well, here's Michael Fallon. What's he saying? Never mind the actual overall state of the armed forces. They haven't got the equipment. They're desperately short on proper manpower. His priority is ethnic minorities and more women. It's nothing to do with gender. Doesn't actually matter how physically tough you are. We're going to get a cross-gender army, transgender army, and that's what he's interested in. It's all about talent. Whereas this is the reality. Change agent David Cameron. We've talked about the destruction of British aircraft carriers, the maritime patrol aircraft, but this was the Mirror reporting that the biggest warship, HMS Ocean, is going to be scrapped just after it's had 65 million spent on it. So that'll be sent overseas for Turkey to profit. And these are the organisations that are driving the agenda. Sorry, we've got a little bit of interference there on screen. So Chatham House, if you don't understand what Chatham House is, have a look at it. The Royal Institute of International Affairs. These are the behind-the-scenes change agents setting government policy. But we had featured this gentleman a few days ago, General Sir Nicholas Carter, and we picked up on his language because he's talking about change and evolving in the army. He says here we need to be match fit to run the business. So the defence of the nation has apparently become a business. Efficiency, productivity, prosperity. It's all newspeak there. And then it gets better, fusing all the available levers of national power against multiple audiences to deliver successful outcomes. I'd like somebody to explain that text in relation to protecting the nation. But he bigs up on 77 Brigade, which he said is going to change the army's behaviour by non-kinetic means, soft rather than hard. Interesting, Mike, this man is talking about soft power projection as an army general, which rather fits in very nicely with Boris Johnson using the same language to get in and subvert foreign countries.
Absolutely.
So here's the 77 Brigade, and what we were interested in is that they're focusing on the behavioural analysis of actors, audiences and adversaries. So we've got applied psychology being used as a weapon, and we labelled this "War is Peace, Truth is Blurred." This is Army PSYOPs, but actually the PSYOPs are also being used in the Army, where we're seeing new management speak cropping up everywhere. Now, today we were given a fantastic piece of information by a researcher who simply mentioned a name to us, and let's see where that led. Well, a little while ago we were talking about the Defence Academy and asking how it was that the training of the higher levels of the military has now been put into largely private hands. So the Institute of Government, claiming to be independent, is in course tied up with Sainsbury's supermarkets. But here was the gentleman, Stephen Hart, who's turned up as NHS National Director of Leadership. But where did he start his days? He started as a junior officer in the Royal Marines, had a career in the Royal Marines, until all of a sudden he ends up with a role connected with that Defence Academy.
How does that happen?
Well, how does it happen? We're going to ask David what he thinks of this in a minute. But immediately after that, his career takes off in the Royal Marines, Task Force Commander Afghanistan, First Sea Lord Fellow, where apparently he's helping to write senior government policy. And then he hops across into the NHS, where he's going to train leaders in NHS. David, this man is astonishing, but he gives us a picture of these specially selected leaders who seem to be able to do everything. He's going to hop from killing people as efficiently as possible. That's the job of the Royal Marines if they're put into the combat arena. And now he's going to apparently transform the NHS to be caring for people. What's your thoughts?
Yeah, a truly astonishing career here in such a short space of time to be involved with this enormous change agenda in the machinery there of Whitehall, military, and NHS, and everything. All of the key bits of our country. I mean, it just begs the question. I mean, it's almost like the guy's been thrown by a velvet glove into these, really, really choice spots. But the subject matter is all, as you've said, Brian, it's all change. And I mean, we've got to beg the question back to General Nick Carter here, really, on what the successful outcome will be of all this, and is the successful outcome already predetermined to be EU military union or EU defence union, whichever phraseology they're going to use on this, or whatever phraseology Fallon is going to use on it. So, that's what it's looking like, and this whole category of change is all so focused on reframing people. And I've got to say, from my own experience with interfacing with old senior officers, middle ranking officers, there definitely seems to be a cut-off period in the 90s and noughties. Once you get past that, it's very, very difficult to talk to these people in a real-time battlefield scenario of what the reality is in front of us. So there's a cut-off where, the old guys, you can have a perfectly coherent conversation with them about what we perceive the problems and the issues to be. All of a sudden we get to a stage with the newbies, it is impossible. And it's very linear with the politicians, particularly those that are under a party-controlled mantle. So just going back to one thing you said there earlier about the nukes, this is the key stuff. This is the quality of the job. And in terms of this sort of wanting to disarm and all the rest of it, it kind of reminds me something I said in the Lords last year about The people kept going on about the Cold War, and I agree with General Zwack on this. It's a really, you need to be very careful about talking about that and using that phrase unless you actually know what it was all about. Now, and Oppenheimer gave Truman an offer immediately after the first two nukes were demonstrated to disarm, and he refused. So, in all that period, we've gone nowhere. So for them now to be talking about it, I completely concur with you, Brian. It goes back to your question. And well, actually, now are they really actually afraid that Russia's got the whip hand again? But this change agenda, anybody that's looking at this, please pick up your pens, get your pads out, email, challenge your MP, because what we will see, in essence, and I've just put a circular round on this, warning that if we don't nip this in the bud now, you will not see Her Majesty's Armed Services stay in the way that we know them to have been. They're going to change into something else, and I don't like what the change is going to be.
Yeah. David, thank you for that. We're on a really critical issue here where you're talking about not being able to have basically a common sense discussion with recently retired officers. The older officers, you say, you could sit down and have a sensible discussion with, but the newly retired ones, it's like you are talking a different language or they're talking a different language. This is the effect of reframing. And of course, it has been particularly this government, this Conservative government, has been boasting of the behavioural change unit, which it has funded with tens of millions of pounds to say we can change people's views and values. So let's have a look at how that works. I've put this on screen, and what you're going to pick up on is the style of the language. I grew up in a physical world and I speak English. The next generation is growing up in a digital world and they speak social. Where would you expect to find this rather unpleasant text? Well, let's go straight over to the NHS because it's come out of an NHS improving quality document. I get a really sinister sense of this.
Well, I realise that the text is in blue, but nonetheless, it looks like there's blood dripping.
Dripping blood,
yes.
Exactly. And we say, don't believe us, go and have a look at the documents yourself. But here they say in their own documents that they want to stimulate new and, quote, disruptive approaches to transformation and improvement. And we say if you disrupt the NHS, if you disrupt the military, you are going to get death resulting. So this is the style of the material these change agents are producing, the new era of thinking and practice in change and transformation. There's nothing about caring for the sick and the vulnerable. This is new language around new management speak. This is reframing. It's extremely dangerous. And of course, we've got thousands of people dying. We're going to see a bit more of that in a minute. But it was the UK column with this really tremendous piece of research that was done, the NHS Common Purpose towards 1 million change agents. And that is based on NHS documents. People like this in the background, Steve Fairman, interim managing director, NHS Improving Quality. He said that we've got to get a spirit into people. And if you listen to the video clip on YouTube, you'll find his demeanour at this point is really remarkable. So we've said, well, we're not sure what spirit he wants to get into the NHS, but we don't get a good feeling because this gives us an idea. Nothing about care. This is all about leadership, power, ego, and change. So here's some of the documentation. They openly say they're working to achieve a common purpose. They openly talk about 1 million change agents. And if we have a look at the authors, this lady, director at Rethink Health, and this gentleman here, leading communities. So this is all leadership stuff. And of course, this is document after document worth thousands and thousands of pounds not being spent on health. And these are the collaborators in the background, or some of them. This is the third sector. These are change agents themselves, not producing anything, simply beginning to interfering. Mike, you found this one a while ago. So we've got NHS people being trained by putting up post-it notes. Who is actually doing this transformation. This is a video with Helen Bevan, who's Chief Transformation Officer in the NHS. Just recommend you listen to some of the things she's saying. But I'm going to say brace yourself for the next bit, because in Scotland, this is where we're now heading. We've got the official launch of the Institute of Creation. And you can see this on a YouTube clip. What do they have to say about themselves? Well, their main vision is working together, key philosophy being one collective energy to ripple through everyone. One collective energy. But look who they're working with: the Scottish Office, Health Boards, NHS. And this is the language. They're working to grow and develop bigger, better, bolder lives in communities so that everybody can contribute to society in the best way they can. Creative activities to create healthier futures, and for people who work in our communities and workplaces to feel valued. This is reframed language of people who are living in a reality which is not the real world, but how dangerous putting these people into the healthcare system. But they're supported by this organisation, Unlock the Key UK. Have a look at this website, truly astonishing. This is about NLP reframing people. And of course, they're very keen on children, where amongst other things, they say that any unhelpful or harmful ideas and beliefs the children have got are going to be reset.
Wow.
Wow. So here are people, parents will have no idea what the value, the moral values or any other values that these people have in Unlocking the Key UK. They're going to be let loose near your children. And if they decide your children have got some beliefs, Christianity perhaps, that they don't like, then your child is going to be reset. David, if I measured this on the scale of subversion, which of course was the thing we were constantly warned about during the Cold War, never mind material forces on the ground in the Warsaw Pact, what we had to be really careful of was subversion unleashed in UK. We are seeing an aggressive and very dangerous subversive campaign operating in UK at the moment. But this is political and has clearly been initiated from within our own government system. Comments or criticisms?
Absolutely. And that is exactly the case. This is subversion. And anybody that, I mean, we just got to just stand back and say what you see. How do you reset a child then? How does that work? How do these people intend to do then? That sounds like properly defence condition 1. Really, what on earth is that? You're going to reset a child? I couldn't think of anything more abhorrent. We've really we're going to hit the wall so soon in this country if this nonsense isn't stopped. Where are they heading with all this? And there was a part of that piece that you've just gone through there, Brian, where I started laughing because it sounded like something from Spike Milligan or Monty Python, and it was like the Ministry of Silly Walks or something or other. But then, of course, as you go further into it, this stuff is deadly serious. It is absolutely so alarming, and the matter of the fact, all these people, all these bodies, all these organisations are getting huge amounts of taxpayers' money. They don't actually do anything. They're not on the shop floor as a nurse or a doctor in a hospital. They're not in the coalface of the military. They're not a policeman. They're not an inspector that's actually going out and nicking criminals. They're not a fireman that's actually putting fires out. All these people are just getting in the way of how our society should be getting on. And frankly, if the politicians don't get to grips with this soon, never mind about the Russians. It's our own state that's going to be undoing us.
Well, David, just to add a bit to that, of course, we know that within Westminster, NLP leadership change specialists have been training MPs. The last figure I saw was at least over 80 MPs had been reframed. And of course, they said the trainer was absolutely fantastic. We'll bring some information up on that in forthcoming news programs. But this is the danger, that this applied behavioural psychology has been unleashed inside Westminster. It's been unleashed on the political research teams, and it was unleashed within the civil service in a very big way, of course, Julia Middleton's common purpose, trying to get hold of the contract to do this reframing on the top 200 civil servants. We are now seeing departments that simply can't react in a common sense way to their day-to-day duties because the people are literally off their heads.
Well, I mean, it is a religion for them.
It is a religion, yeah. Okay, well, we'll just put this last slide up. Where does this sort of stuff lead? Well, of course, the truth is there if we know where to look for it in the national press. So the Mail here a little while ago was reporting top doctors' chilling claim the NHS kills off 130,000 elderly patients every year. And I can say that we have information now starting to pour into the UK column, which is supporting this level of statistics. And the most sinister thing with it is that you're seeing, as well as getting rid of these elderly people, some vulnerable children are within this category. The language being used by the new leaders, the future leaders, is that, of course, these people have got to go because they are not contributing to society. And if we remember what the lady from Unlocking the Key UK, what she was saying is we are to be of one mind. So if the state doesn't believe you're contributing, it's going to simply say we're going to get rid of you. David, very quick comment to end our news today.
It sounds like we're heading for a dictatorship.
I think we're already
it's
there.
As simple as that. You know, if you've got to refrain people and we want a one conscious thing, and if you then speak out against that, what do you end up with? Do you get beheaded, put in prison for 25 years? Where are we going with this? This is an utter nonsense. It's so far out of our sphere of common law and our culture in this country that it is a far greater effrontery to the good people of this nation than Putin would ever know how. Not that he's even fired a shot. So, you know, let's just everyone have a reality check. The problem, and I've said this week and last week in a couple of circulars I've put out, the problem is not Russia. The problem is our own government.
Yeah. David, thank you very much for that. And of course, what better note to end on? And we say, please, if you're not already booked in to go, get a ticket for that British Constitution Group event, because this is bringing together a large number of people to talk about these very issues and what needs to be done. And what needs to be done has to happen very quickly indeed, as we see this hidden state unfolding in front of our very eyes. Thank you very much for joining us. If you're not a subscriber to UK Column, please sign up with us because we need your help to keep broadcasting information and analysis of what is really going on in UK. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.